I'm the Director of Rugby Operations. I'm not very good at standing still behind the podium, so I will wander a bit, so just stay with me. Bit of my background to figure that side out if we haven't. I'm in sports management about 23 years now. I'm a little bit older than I look, obviously. For me, I've been through with badminton, soccer, table tennis, pickleball, tennis, various sports right across between Ireland, England, and in Canada. My wife dragged me here 14 years ago. She's from Markham, where we still are. And so yeah, it's been an interesting year and a half for me being in rugby, as that's where I grew up. I started playing rugby when I was 6. And getting back to it is lovely. My mother always warned me. I kind of listened to what Jasmine was saying earlier on. My mother had the same thing. She would not go to my matches until she saw me limping home one day. I had to tell her, unfortunately, I walked into a bin. It was nothing to do with rugby. Got to pay attention better. But what I want to try to get across from today, I've been a coach educator for 12 years within soccer, been involved in coaching for 20 years in various sports. What we need to figure is leaving our club hats at home. Today, really what we want to do is bring the stuff back to our clubs, but what we try to get from this is, how do we grow the sport? How do we improve what's going on? There's no way I have all the answers. None of us really do. That's the hope of using everybody that's here. We will go into breakout rooms, which is the tables all around us. What we want to do is take what you've got. How do we work together? How do we make sure that that's the way this is going to go, rather than my club need this? Rugby won't grow that way. We are fighting against a lot of other sports, and fighting is the word, to try and make sure that we're relevant, that we're growing, that we have a place and we take it. I love what some of Jasmine and Brian were talking about earlier with what is rugby. I know for me growing up, it was that values. That was what rugby was to me. It was the community. It was some of that. Like when I went away to school and came back to my local club to play, even though it was different levels of sport, it was the community. It was amazing to be able to go back to that. And anytime I still go home to Ireland, it's seeing those people and still being able to have that. That's what rugby is. I think that's rugby beyond any other sport, is that community, is that family. So hopefully we can kind of get with that. So with that in mind, we kind of looked at some of the numbers this year alone. We have 649 registered coaches for 407 teams. So that's about 1.6 coaches per team. For me, it seems a little bit low. I know it's down to registration versus actual activity, and I can understand some of the registration things. That's why we'll kind of go through some of that a little later. But if we look at the numbers that are going through courses, we had 233 go through a level 1 this year alone. That's fantastic. Within the match officials, we have 252 that are covering approximately 2,000 games. Now, within that, there's quite a few of those that only do 1 or 2 games. There's others that are doing 50 to 60 games, as Rebecca will attest to. This year, we had 107 take the level 1, which is pretty good. If we look at 2022, we had 86. In 2023, we had 120. Where the problem comes in with a lot of these is moving that into active. So I did the stats last year looking, and we haven't done it yet for this year, but we looked at, right, what's the number of those taking a course versus actually getting onto a field? Starts at about 40% in the first year. By the second year, it goes down to 19. We've got to figure why. So why we come into calling it game management versus having a refs and a coaches session, because we are the ones that control the game. As coaches, as referees, this is up to us. We think of who's the most influential people in our lives growing up, coaches and peers. Who's going to influence a game? Hopefully in the most positive way possible, match officials. Okay, so that need to work together and understand we are one group, we are one team. That for me is vital. So that's why we're putting it together. So looking at our agenda for the next little bit, I'm going to run through a little bit of a presentation. Then we're going to go into our groups. So I've got 8 tables around. We may not need them all, but I want a smaller group so as we can actually have a conversation versus big groups where nobody talks. So we'll break out in little groups based on age groups that you're coaching or officiating with. And we do want that mix. Then we'll regroup and have a little bit of a debrief and get the feedback from you. What we want to do is make sure we're taking away productive, proactive material from today from you. You got to take stuff from us, but we want to make sure we're getting that from you. Okay? And then how we put that into play. So you've seen this for the day. The good thing is you actually get lunch at the end of this. So I'm looking forward to that part. Getting through the brief. The objectives. Part of this is me just playing with slides, watching while my wife watches stuff on TV at night. Let's be honest, I'm not watching some of that reality stuff. Anybody online, please don't tell her that. But yeah, so the big things we want to get out of is understanding our roles. So when we are sitting at a table, we want to make sure that it's people from different organizations. So not 2 people from one club sit at a table. We've got match officials and we've got coaches. So as we're all able to have a productive conversation on how we are going to be together and how we have that. What we want to get is regional coordination. We're working on, and hopefully, and that goes back there, is trying to get a schedule out, next week? Yeah, trying to get it out in the next week or so for courses for the next year. We'll go through some of the hurdles on why it's been slower than I had even hoped, and that kind of looks at that. But also the alignment with competition. You'll have seen, or many of you may have seen already, some of the releases of structuring for competition. One problem with sending out PowerPoints and PDFs is people don't see a lot of it and understand. So that's why we'll have a bit of that conversation today. That's not going to be the in-depth part. It's more the alignment between officiating, coaching, and that competition aspect. How it's all in one. And then the important part of actually increasing options for the youth. Some of the feedback we get from educators going into level 1 about some of the younger people coming through is they're not ready. Well, they're not ready because we're not providing the opportunities. So how do we make sure that we've got people churning through the system, making sure they stay in our sport? So this is where we want to have a look at that. Everything we do, we try to make sure it has a strategic alignment. So anything that you see coming from us will have this because this was done in collaboration with you. As we move into the last year of our current strat plan, we will be putting this to look at how we grow this and continue our strategic plan with clubs as the center and athletes, coaches, match officials really being the driver for all of these aspects. Okay, so supporting the community is always going to be number 1. How do we grow participation? Meaningful competition for me is probably the most important aspect. You'll hear that a lot coming from me. Alignment and meaningful competition, my staff get very annoyed at hearing me say all the time. You'll be the same, because that's where it really has to have the impact. The amount of emails I get from parents saying, oh, my kids hate this because they just get blown out on a Saturday. They're not coming back because they just got trampled by this one team. That has to stop. We look at the same when we even look at senior competitions. There's a drastic difference in levels within our province. That's not going to retain people. It's not going to recruit people. It's not going to help our sport grow. So this is where we have to look at that. So that's why we have to look at each of these being that. How do we have more club-led elements? I was speaking with somebody earlier on. It's like, I do not want to go say a club must have these standards if we don't have the resources and foundation to provide the clubs with the ability to do that. Absolutely no point in me saying you must have 10 level 3s in your club. It's not realistic. I saw that happen within other sports in which they set the bar very, very high, but gave nothing as a support mechanism in which to achieve those things. That's just stupid. We don't want to go there. We want to go this together. So how do we do that? How do we create that? So this is once again at the tables when we start looking at challenges and opportunities. This is where we want to get to. Okay. Build belonging. Brian's kind of talked to that already. This year is my first year at Ritz as well, and it was amazing. Part of me wonders, why can't we do more of those? Why can't a club do those in their area and attract in sponsors and work with new people that haven't played the sport and do these different aspects? Why not? That's a question I have to ask. A lot of it comes down to insurance, so we have our friends up in Vancouver to speak to about that one, but we will. But how do we create opportunities? Like how many of you started when you're, let's say, a lot younger, a bit younger, of playing and are still going? We want the same for everybody, right? So this is where we got to get to. Okay. How many of you are familiar with the AT-AD model, LT-AD model? Okay. So this for me is something I studied in England during my master's. And funny enough, when going through it and actually learning it, the biggest thing I learned is most of the best researchers in the world live in Canada. And so I had to study them in England to move here to meet some of them, and that was pretty cool. That's the nerdy side of me. I try to keep that one away. But what we're trying to do is understand coaching, understand officiating, understand competition from a growth perspective. So rather than trying to throw a senior competition model onto 12-year-olds, what is realistic to 12-year-olds? What is realistic to 6 and 7-year-olds and keeping them in? I know for me, when I traveled around going to festivals, the only thing I needed to do to get my 2 kids in the car, you get a freezy. Done. That was it. We got to 4 or 5 festivals. I drove from Markham to Collingwood and back with no issues whatsoever because they got a freezy. So this is where we have to look at, it's like, what are those things within each age group? How are we making sure to use that? And what's the system we need to put in place for that? And it's all the way through. High performance is one of those words that's thrown around that I don't like because it's different. Performance development is more the word I like to use. So how are we looking at that? How is that being integrated into competition? How is that being integrated for coaching? See Trevor wearing the hoodie. So it's a matter of how we're working with you, Trevor, to make sure that that's where you're aspiring and can get to and can do more with that. We're not providing enough for that. We need to do better at that. How do we do that? That's what I'm hoping you're going to help with. Okay. One of the things that's hit me over the last while is a lack of pathway. We don't understand because we haven't seen a clear graph on where do we move as players. So if I'm a 6-year-old coming in, where do I go? It's not about the 6-year-old, it's the customer. The customer is the parent. They're the ones paying for this. So for them to be able to see and to understand, and this is very much in me playing with things. I'm not a graphical artist. Thankfully, I have people that help me with that. But it's more getting the concept. How do we develop this to understand and be able to provide? Because soccer has it, hockey has it. These other sports we're competing with, you know when you go in, where you're going, what the competitions are, what's involved in each of these. So as a parent, I know for me, Johnny, I'll share this with you guys so you can have it. Why we want to have it is like I see as a parent, right? I can know where I'm going. I know there's opportunity. I know what's involved. I know that once we get to 12, we're starting to do intro to contact. How do I feel about that? What are the options? My wife is an absolute no-no. I'm going to have to sneak my son into a different way of doing it somehow. But this is where we have to be mindful of the customer, the player, and each person involved. What is the competition level within them? How does that path move toward performance development? What is contact versus non-contact? Where do each of these fit? Where do we then fit with coaching and match officials? If I look at it now and I've seen bits and pieces, none of them are age appropriate. So how do we do that? It's tricky given we don't control any of it, but it is a matter of what can we do outside of control the controllables? What can we actually manage ourselves and have a look at this? I'm speaking to match officials. A lot of kids that go in at level 1 aren't ready. So is there something we can do before? And that's where we're moving to game lead. We look at any of the match official and coaching stuff. None of them deal with 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds and how to do it. And that's fine. But we have to understand that and be ready for that. And same with level 2s. One of the things we keep hearing about is have we got appropriate match officials and coaches for the level of competition? If we're trying to increase the level of competition, we need to increase the level of coaches and match officials. So how do we set that and how do we do that? So that's what each of these start to look at. Okay. Now, competition structure. I'm not going to say this is going to be the biggest one for debate. This is probably one of the bigger ones people are interested about, but we're going to break it into 4 groups. We've got the minor that looks at U6, U4 and U6, and then U8 and U10. U to U12, 14, junior 16, 18, and then senior. A lot of it isn't different, it's just breaking it out in different ways in order to help with some of the transition work. So what do we mean by that? Joss will walk you through some of the minor and youth aspects. So that's her area.
Hello. Okay. So this one hasn't gone out to anyone yet, but our minor working group has gone through this in great depth with me. So big shout out to everyone. I think we've got a few maybe here from our minor working group who've helped put all this together. So we're looking at splitting up our minor age group a little bit. So terminology we're using, rookies are U4 and U6. Now, 95% of our clubs don't offer U4 yet anyways. If that's something that you may be thinking about, U4, U6, we're looking at house league programs. So those kids don't need to be driving across the province to go to a festival, right? We want to keep them really local so it's easy and accessible for parents. It doesn't need to be 16 weeks of the year. Just get them in, let them try it, let them sport sample, let them develop a taste for it so they want to come back for more. Our minor group then is our U8s, U10s. We're doing more of the traditional minor festivals. Got a slight change that we'll talk about in a sec. And then our U12s are kind of being pulled out of minors to align with the U14 as that intro to contact age group. So we can tailor that a little bit more. So festivals. So this is looking at minor and youth festivals, and I'm going to actually start with regional. Okay, so our biggest ones, which in the past would have been like our Rugby Ontario Minor Festival and U14 wrap-up day, right? Where they're getting a medal, they're traveling a bit further. It's meant to be kind of the big end of season thing. Those are going to be our regional ones. So for minors, we're looking at having an east, central, and a west. For youth, so U12, U14, will be an east and a west. So a little bit more travel for competition with the youth group. Then we pair that back, and these will all also, I don't know if we're talking about hosting stuff now. I don't think it's gone out yet. Just went out yesterday or Thursday or Friday this week. The first package of the host proposals. So these events, these 5 regional events will all be open for clubs to host, right? Rugby Ontario will be supporting that, but it's not going to be us hosting it at Fletcher's Field or Whitby, wherever, right? We will go to host with and at the club that sort of has the best proposal, right? And we'll have one in each of those regions. Then we'll have open festivals. Open festivals will be much more like our standard minor festivals that you're used to. A club hosts it, any other club can sign up and go to it. The difference here is that we're going to limit that a little bit more so that we don't end up with a club having to cancel theirs because there's too many other festivals happening in similar regions or close region. So we're going to limit that a little bit within the regions, and hopefully those will be like bigger, your kind of like invitational tournament to go to if you want a little bit more. And then we'll leave a few weekends that will be just for your divisional tournament or festival. And that will be for minors. One of the clubs in your division will host. Within your division, you'll decide who that is. So you say, okay, there's Club A, Club B, Club C, Club D. Well, Club A is hosting an open one. Maybe they don't want to do a divisional one as well. So Club C, D, and E are going to host divisional ones on these 3 weekends that we have. So they will be smaller. You might be playing yourself a little bit more, or the same teams over and over a little bit, but we want to just keep travel down and you're just getting some competition close to home. And then for clubs that's all they need, great. Maybe you go to one open and you go to a regional. Maybe you just do that if you're newer, smaller. Maybe you kind of check your box of doing your divisional ones, and then you fill up your schedule and you do it every other weekend because you want to travel and you want to go and do all the things. So that's sort of like a little bit more flexibility for clubs. If they want to start the season earlier, there'll be some open ones earlier. If they want to go a little bit longer, there'll be some open ones through August as well for those that want to continue their season longer. Our regional ones, we're looking at the end of July. So they'll be the last 2 weekends of July. whichever day clubs want to host. Okay, for youth specifically, again, looking at, we've had in the past, U12 especially, clubs not quite ready for contact, those first few tournaments potentially. So what we want to do is we want to take that first divisional weekend and work with our development specialists and our leaders in the area, so like our RDCs, technical directors at clubs, that kind of thing, and take that first weekend. It'll be a bit of a hybrid. We're still, again, like open to some feedback of what this will look like and how we'll make it work. And Nappy's a great one. They did a lot of this sort of thing in Eastern Ontario last year, so we're kind of pulling on that model a bit. But trying to take that first weekend and say, it's going to be player development, coach development, and match official development. It might be like a joint training session, and then we play some games for a little bit in the afternoon, right? Doesn't need to be a full just festival. So trying to transition people into that contact in a really safe and meaningful way with some development specialists in there. And then it gives us that consistency across the board. It allows us to get all the match officials, all the coaches on the same page, everyone understanding law variations, all that kind of thing. So trying to launch the season in a better way. And then you go off and either take a few weeks off, go to some open festivals, whatever your club is looking for. Okay, new change for this year as well. U12, we are encouraging a split this year. And at first we weren't sure how that would look, but when I actually pulled out the U12 girls numbers from the U12 full numbers, in most of our divisions, I think it's going to be just fine. There's a few cases where it's going to be a struggle and it'll probably end up being a bit of a joint team still. Not an issue, right? They don't need any sort of paperwork. If your club needs to run it as co-ed still, they can still enter into either festival, whatever we need to do. But we're hoping to encourage more and more opportunities for girls to play with and against girls more often. We also think, and this has come from several of the pieces of feedback we've gotten, more girls will sign up if there's an option for them to not play with the boys. So just, you might think we don't have enough girls for that. If you offer girls, you might have enough girls. U14 will continue to split. And then just noting that the open festivals, that's where you kind of propose to us, what do you want that festival to look like? It doesn't need to be all of the U12s and the U14s. It might be just a U14. It might be all the girls, right? U12 and U14 girls all together one day. So opportunities for us to do a little bit more in terms of like something special or something interesting or unique at those open festivals.
The key that you'll see in any of these is really flexibility. I found for a long time that it was just so rigid that it's very difficult to grow and have flexibility. It's very different in Sarnia than it is in Ottawa. So painting the problems with one brush is just going to lead to failure. So what we want to do is create that flexibility within any of these competitions. The junior competition structure you would have seen go out. I'm not going to go through all of the things that were sent. The key part to this, and some of it is getting confused out there from what I'm hearing. It's not changing the cup side that we've known for years. It's not changing that aspect. It's the level below. Because what we've had is teams that email us or call us in late June that say, well, we should be in the cup. We now have 18 players. You're not really ready to go up against clubs that have 2-3 teams and are going to smash you on the weekend. But there was nowhere else for them to go. So what we wanted to do is create that second level for clubs that are trying to grow a program and yet need to have meaningful competition. So that's really where it's trying to grow and change versus anything else that's kind of happening. So I know there's a lot of slides that go into the ones that went out in more detail, and sometimes that leads to worse confusion when we try to give more detail, but that's the essence. It's not as much changing the cup. We're trying to put a little bit more of a framework in to allow flexibility within the system. So are there tweaks that are needed? Absolutely. So when we send it out now, the idea was sending out now so as to make sure that if there is feedback and things that are missing, we can still have time to tweak. Okay? There's nothing written in stone per se, but we want to keep a specific framework that allows for clubs that are ready to be in a cup. Clubs that have a plan and know what they're trying to do, may not be there yet, but they find the opportunity is there for them to grow, it's still fine for them to enter the cup. It's self-determination. So if you determine as a club that that's where you should be, now if it's somebody out of the blue and that comes to us that are really new and we'll have a conversation. But we want to make sure that it's realistic for everybody to be able to have opportunities. Because right now it's cup or nothing. That isn't going to work. So that's why we brought in that second level, is more looking there. So like what we have within those is, and for every level of competition, the biggest thing I hear is travel. We're in a big province. Travel is going to be a pain no matter what. So what we're trying to do is break it down as close as we can regionally. I use the phrase regional rather than branch, because branch gets very secular within this is my boundary, get away from my area. Regional is more opening that up to make common sense for players and teams to play against each other that are within a good geographical area. So that's why I kind of changed some of the terminology. It'll still be run at branch level, and branch are great for helping with that. But what we wanted to do then is make sure you get enough games at that lower, and then have a regional tournament in which you can have higher level of competition. The other part is making sure that all of these are getting hosted at clubs. So as sport becomes more visible within the areas, there's nothing going to be hosted centrally like we had at Fletcher's anymore. You'll have seen, or some of you may have seen that went out yesterday. So that's the idea of spreading some of these events right the way across. About 18 events, I think, that are open to bidding, but it's trying to make sure that it's helping to grow the sport. So hopefully we'll see them right the way across the province in that way. But this is where we look at. It's also hopefully going to help those cup teams, because the cup teams, as much as we don't like going to go get beaten, the top teams aren't learning anything either from having those games. So this is where we got to be mindful of both ends of the spectrum. So hopefully that this allows that flexibility to make sure that we have more meaningful competition. If we're finding in this year, this is where it gets tricky, because at U16 may not be the same as U18. Every year there may be a different thing. So this is why creating a framework versus a strict thing is where we want to try to get to, and have a little adaptability every year. So we may find that next year we had a great U17 squad, or those that are U17 age, so at U18 would be able to do this. So I didn't do cup last year, but I can do cup this year. So that allows for that based on the age groups that you have. And this is then where we want to move into coaching standards and stuff like that, that we have to have a look at from a development perspective. We'll get onto that a bit later. Does that make sense? I know there was a little bit of, oh, what the hell is this? Is this going to mean I don't get to play in the cup? No, if you determine you are good for the cup and you're happy to go there, and you've got a plan in which you're developing players and moving people through, and that's the best place for you to get meaningful competition, go there, play there.
Cup team at your 18, then your B team play in the regional team.
Yep. Some places want to have it that the A and the B travel together, and so they have it. So that's one of those my kind of small detail we got to figure, because some places want to have both teams travel at the same time to play against A's and B's. Some don't have the numbers to do that. So this is where it's got to come into the registration side of things and figuring out those numbers that we don't have and are so fluctuated every year. That's going to be one of those that has to be figured out, but that is an option. Johnny?
Will there be like a criteria for the framework? Like, would that be driven by registration, coaches, coaching levels, things like that? So as you mentioned, like if you have a team that has 18 players and think they can put their hand up to go there, so will there be a criteria that where you have a club has to meet a certain threshold, whether that's registration, coaches, that before you can compete in that cup?
Yeah, so some of that's already in the document that was sent out.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so you should see that. The idea is more, this is year one of it. So by year two, we're going to get into more of that coaching standards, club standards thing that way to try and grow it. Like if we look at soccer and OPDL, is probably one of the more, like their criteria is 50 points, checkpoints that you must hit. Like we're not going to go on there. That's a bit much. But yeah, that's the idea of trying to get people more realistic. It may take year one for people to figure out, it's like, I'm not in my depth here. I shouldn't be doing this. And if it takes that year for people to figure it out, it may take that year.
I would say
when you're putting that all together, understanding the flexibility in registration becomes a key.
Yeah.
I've seen too often in multiple clubs that have been around for a long time where there's some danger numbers. And I think for growth, we often err on the side of fielding a team instead of erring on the side of getting play time. So what I mean by that, if you're looking at 25 to 30, or you're looking at 45 to 60 kids in a program, is that one, is it two, is it three teams? We often go, oh, well, kids have vacations, kids won't be here. And then when all of a sudden they love what you're doing and they show up, they don't get playtime. And when they don't get playtime, they say piss off. And then we lose great athletes. I've seen it across other clubs as a person witnessing it. I've experienced it within our own club. We need to make sure that there's flexibility. I know in the past, Rugby Ontario says, oh, you gotta have 20 kids, or the next 20, get another team. If I got 30 kids or 32 kids, you're really struggling, you won't let me have a second team to 40. Now I can't even play kids half a game at 32. I'd rather see kids playing. And we figure out what that means at that B regional level. If you want to have a higher criteria to say you're playing up, fine, but.
Yeah, and that's why this one is following game on. So in that way, if you show up and you got 15 players, play 10 aside. If you've got 14 players, play 12. Whatever way works for both teams to have that, to make sure games are happening, that's the most important thing. And that's very, very important, because and looking at the other side of it, Gary and I were talking about this earlier, it's like you had teams this year, last year too, that had enough for two very full squads, but yet it was the same 18 that seemed to be playing very much all the time to go out and beat the crap out of the other teams and learn nothing and develop nothing, and then where the player's going. So you have a little bit on both sides, but yeah, that's exactly, the regional is very much game on. It isn't you must have this. And I had a conversation with the club Wednesday, and they're like, well, we could never enter U18s because we only had 17 players. That's exactly what regional is for. Enter U17 and play 10 aside, play 12 aside. Middle of July, people are going on holidays. We know that's going to happen. But yeah, game time is vital. This also where it comes back to, do a club have a plan? Do you have the coaches and try to get to that point? This is where we need to help with that coach development aspect of it too, and club planning side is like games are vital. Vital, yeah.
So, just in terms of enabling like 10s or 12s to be played, will the game regs for each of the levels be clear in that capacity? Because I know that there have been situations when I've been coaching juniors, it's like, well, it's not in the game regs, so you have to default the game because you don't have 15, even though like majority of the time, my experience in the girls' game is coaches will come and say, we'll discuss and okay, let's just get the game played. It's a league game or whatever, and we're going to play 12s. But you do come across some teams who say, nope, you don't have 15, you're defaulting, we'll still play, but we win the game. So will there be flexibility written into game regs so that everybody understands that we're just trying to play rugby here and get as many people playing as often as possible?
Yes, that slide is coming a little bit later. But yeah, that is there, that's being developed. The competitions committee that we have from across the province are starting the operations manual review now. They got it, yes, Thursday? Started? Yep, Thursday they got the material to start reviewing all the rules, regulations and everything around competitions. And then Jocelyn and Rob have been working on the development matrix, which we're going to look at in a little bit. Yep. I'm just going to move to 7s, but same. That's good. Yeah.
Are the regional tournaments excluding the top teams? Or are they
Yes.
excluding?
It'll be like a seconds team, you know.
Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah,
They're separate.
Okay.
No.
And there'll be some ways to make sure that some teams don't all their best players.
Yeah, it would be just stupid. But yeah, you have to combat stupidity.
Just to build on that, have we thought about rostering teams similar to other sports?
Mhm.
Instead of voting, if you want to be in that top tier,
Yeah.
those players are rostered to the top tier and cannot come in.
Yeah, what we've looked at is having, say, here's your squad, but obviously front row may be an exemption. Given injuries, the front row, we don't have enough of them, we need to develop more of them, but in the interim, maybe we'll have to have front rows allowed, but you must be a designated front row. Things that way, which is where we're getting into complications. So this is why it's still a debate and hasn't been done yet,
They're
because,
always the most dangerous players to bring down.
but it has to be due to injury. So this is where it comes in, and unfortunately, when we deal with the honor code, it's not always honored. So it's kind of tricky to say. It's like, look, come on, for the good of the game, but nobody cares. It's like, how do we win the game? That's what matters most. And this is where we kind of come back to that. Is the first team going to go down to regional? No point to that. Waste of everybody's time, and that's not the point of it. So we're trying to find how do we set those regulations while also allowing flexibility for injuries to specific areas. Yeah, that's why the region is very much game on, so as to allow for the flexibility of the number. Yeah, so players going up, no problem. Coming down is where we're trying to find that, let's say, happy medium, that kind of area. Well,
You're saying game on, I'm guessing a lot of people don't know what game on means.
okay. Fair, this is your area.
So World Rugby put out game on guidelines, and we have kind of shared their link, but what we haven't done as much of yet, which will come into that sort of matrix that we'll talk about a little bit more, is we want to put like, these are the standards for each of the leagues. And then so when we talk about juniors, right, the cup will have a certain standard, and then the regional will have different flexible standards. So things like, it might be a full 8-on-8 scrum, or you don't have that, well, you go and contest it. That's not an issue. And to Barb's point, that's not a penalty. We just want them playing rugby. So if we need to go to 12s or 10s or 7s half field, like, we adapt as needed. And so what we'll try to do, the World Rugby guidelines are pretty open. So what we will try to do, that BC has done a little bit of, is put a little bit clearer guideline of, if this many players show up, or you have this many trained front row, here's the adaptation you'll use based on game on. So that you're not just trying to figure it out and agree, because what I've personally seen is players show up, or teams show up and say, we don't have enough, so we're gonna go 7s, and then they're playing full field 7s instead of a 15s game. Those are different sports, right? If you're gonna drop numbers at a certain point, we need to drop the field size as well. So we'll try and put those pieces in place as well.
The key is really just having the game happening, so game on, and having it still meaningful, rather than going, you forfeited, I don't care, I'm done. Or teams showing up and realizing they don't have enough players, so we're not going to play the game. It's making sure that the game stays on and stays meaningful. But yeah, we'll put out a full thing on that.
And
Sorry.
I was gonna say, at the cup level, there will be more of those standards, because at the cup level, we don't want those teams that are very strong and have, 60 players that are ready to play a full 15s competitive full U19 Operations game at U18, show up and have another team be like, we actually only have 12 today, can we play 10s? Like, that's not what they signed up for in the cup. So we want to keep those modifications. If you're not ready for the full 15s cup competitive, then we've got another place for you to do game on.
The couple of you're gonna limit the squad size to say 23, and that they teams turn up with 40 players and change the whole.
Yeah, it's similar to seniors. Yeah, 25 to 30 is usually how they have it. 25 is the usual. Yeah, it's also based on the team sheet that we have on software, so it kind of helps with that. But yeah, so that will be all set in there for sure. Yeah. The other one is making sure that when you have the first and second teams back to back, that it's not the first team player is going to play the second game again, and now players are playing so many minutes to just go with, rather than people sitting on the bench not getting game time. So it's kind of back to that again. Okay, there is a lot more kind of going out. The idea, I'll just start with this one, is we are putting together an entire communication plan to come out starting January time. That's going to be aimed at going through all of this, getting some people from clubs involved that were a part of the committee that's coming up with these things, and kind of explaining further on, so as to hope that it's something you can use with your members as much as for yourself. Because in that way, if parents or anybody is asking questions, we've got a video, we've got information that's going to be able to provide that. But there will be an awful lot more coming out over the next couple of months. Making sure it's nice and clear.
This session is also recorded. So for those of you kind of taking pictures and stuff, we'll send out the recording and the slides and all that.
The next part then that annoyed me for the last couple of years was 7s. So trying to figure out how do we revamp sevens to be organized. It seemed to be an absolute mess last couple of years on how we do anything and how we get to finals and stuff like that. It was also one of the things that annoys me is when you get to a provincial final, you're making a provincial final. Like it should have that kudos and gravitas and that kind of level of best on best at a provincial final. So this is where we have to get back to rather than it just being a anybody can show up day. Or as the case has been the last while, people just not showing up on the day, which is also worse. So what we try to do is maintain some of the club hosting aspects to it. We'll get in a little bit more granular detail on how that's happening, teams showing up, teams being able to play. But it's the qualifying towards the provincials that we wanted to make it a little bit more clear and easy. So each of the branches and regions will host a qualifier, and then the top 3 teams from each will go into the provincial finals. Now we're changing to 3 on this one. So in that way, it should get representation from across the province, but it also should allow for the best of the best from each of those areas in which to get there. Once that's done, clubs can continue hosting sevens events. There's nothing stopping, as long as the weather is good, keep playing, keep doing it. If November allows it, keep playing it into November, that's not a problem.
Why do you switch from regions to branches? You said branches weren't sufficient for 15, why have you then gone to branches this days?
I'd say political, but it's more just based on that's the current setup. So just from a club's perspective, that's where clubs are registered and clubs are in. So it just allows for an easier method. It may be something we look at this time next year and say that didn't work.
There's a lot fewer clubs and some branches know, so it doesn't necessarily work that the best teams will get to provincial.
No, it won't. Probably won't. Like if we look at URU or Swarrow, sorry. But there's a potential that there's going to be a couple of teams within NRU or TRU that may not make it and others will. But right now, if we look at what is the current structure of our sport, there is Rugby Ontario, there are branches and there's clubs. So if we're looking at it from a qualifying perspective, how do you then put into this another way of doing it from a regional? So in that way, sorry? We've done it for 15s because it's based on not making it into a provincial final in this manner. This is a 1 weekend off to get to the next weekend. So having representation from across the province, this is what we're going to try for this season.
The recreational side of 15s is that all the regions.
Yeah.
The cup side of 15s is still.
Yeah, this is still very much in this way. Yeah, I would agree. We're probably going to end up seeing things like that, but how we figure what region teams go in is then we're going to get biased against Middlesex and you're not good enough. We're going to put, so in that way, trying to find, well, this area gets a representation. It's, if we try to satisfy everybody, nobody's going to get anything. It's trying to find that best thing of which way it's going to go. The first step we had to take was getting organized. This year wasn't that. Last year wasn't any better, and we tried to learn from each year. So taking a step in the right direction, I will take right now.
Kind of torn on that, what you're saying as well, in that. Is it a championship with not all the best teams there, but is it a provincial if the whole province isn't represented?
And that's what we can.
You've got to balance that.
Yeah.
And figure that out, which is.
Yeah, the hope is that the best teams, and this is where you look at the 15s and the junior, the best teams will make the junior cup final, hopefully. For this, it's a matter of representational across to fit into a provincial final and get the province-wide final representation. And the hope of giving other teams that never had a chance before that opportunity to get there.
Well, this is still club sevens, not branch sevens.
Yeah.
And the clubs who don't make the qualifiers can carry on playing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Keep going with club events as long as the weather and the fields are open. I would recommend and say, please do. Please keep going and play as long as you can play a season. Yeah.
So this is less to do with the permanent structure and maybe just more fluff, but I think the one thing we miss in rugby, because we're trying to be really accommodating, is we miss the 2-day event. When my kids play soccer, volleyball, basketball, hockey, we go to a tournament, we're staying at a hotel, the team is together, and maybe less than 18, and you don't care as much there. but at U12 to U16 in each group, those social events become part. I know they're not part of this structure, but
They actually are within the junior cup. What you'll see is the finals weekends are a weekend. So as to allow for actual full length games. Because when we're shortening the games, it's also shortening the quality that's getting there. And the opposite said, we played a full game all year. Why aren't we playing a full game? So that in the whole bidding thing that went out yesterday, that was a part of it. I do have issue with some people saying we may not have referees for Friday. But in looking, that'll be the next problem. Actually, that's it. But yeah, so that is the idea of making it. Plus, it's one of those when we go to club and say you bid to host, if you're going to bid and you're going to look for local grants, hotel rooms and weekend things are a part of what your requirements are to get a grant and apply for grants. And this is where I'm hoping it benefits financially to clubs. And that's where it kind of fits within that. So yeah, that's where we're trying to get to on those junior cup ones.
And the other thing you slipped in there was U14, U12 when they get a lot of that money here and have a championship as well.
Yeah, and that's why we try to put the two of them together, so as to get that visual of kind of where you're going.
But is there a championship for U14 or U12?
We can't call it a championship, so it is the wrap-up weekend.
It's the regional.
Regional, yeah, so yes, that is that opportunity there.
For that all year, and it was just industry games without celebration for them.
Yeah, that's what
There's not gonna be a winner from that still.
Yeah, there'll still be a participation thing, but it's a matter of kind of that bonding and that stuff. Like I remember when I first moved here and my wife was doing her masters in Western and going and staying in a hotel in London and it packed full of kids that are there for the weekend playing hockey and stuff like that. That seemed like so much fun. And then soccer stopped all of that and I was like, oh shit, I don't get to go away for a weekend and have fun with this. Whereas that side of it, and then when we are moving in, like I was saying, to that bidding process and bringing opportunities for grants, that's only going to be based on hotel rooms and on weekends and these, so we have to make sure we fit to that as well. But we want it to be, like I think back when I was a kid, I wanted an experience that I remember and I want to come back next year for. So we've got to create experiences and environments, and it's kind of some of that what Brian was talking about earlier, to make sure that I'm enjoying it to come back. So yeah, trying to get back to that side of it. So that's where the bidding stuff went out yesterday. So club presidents and secretaries read that.
And on that youth side as well, when we talk about those open festivals, that's where a club, especially if you're a little more remote, maybe you put together a proposal even with a neighboring club or something, or just yours and get into some sport tourism and look at ours is going to be a weekend. We're going to encourage people to come down for the weekend. We've got a partnership with the hotel. We've got an activity that's going to happen in the evening for families, right? Or a brunch on the Sunday morning. Like, those are the sort of things that when we talk about, especially sort of the central group doesn't have to travel very far. So what can we do with those more remote clubs to maybe encourage people to travel because your event is going to be special and different and worth the road trip?
I hope is by doing it now is we can actually plan. So in that way, when we're looking at it ahead, the hope was to be out a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So like when we look at trying to get stuff out in January, late January, start of February, we can say, look, this is our event for the year. We're going to have a special time where we're going from Markham to Ottawa and we're spending a weekend in Ottawa. We're going to do these things, have a great time. It makes it a fun event for the club to look forward to for fundraising or anything else that we want to do in that. So yeah, bringing back that experience would be the big hope.
That said, do we want you traveling 5 hours every weekend? No, don't do that, please. But like have one big road trip, right?
And that my intent was more around the one, maybe two.
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
sure one's totally enough, but.
Yeah.
It gives clubs the flexibility as well.
Exactly, and that's the key word,
If they
flexibility.
schedule early, they can
Yeah.
then say, no, we're gonna go to this,
Yeah.
and then you get to tell parents as opposed to.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially in sevens, it's like, it's August, what's happening? Oh, we've got the schedule in September, and
Yeah.
then it's like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like part of that is we're going to have conveners ready in January to start talking about sevens. So this is a conversation from now rather than exactly that of, oh, it's August, we should probably figure this out. That seems to have been a little bit how it was. So we've got to move away from that rather than that. All right, seniors. This went out a while ago, so I'm just kind of shorten it down. The big one of this, and this is back again, branches and regions are going to be a bit intermingled for the first year or so while we figure out where teams are and how teams are going. On the men's side, it was a bit easier for branches because of the number of teams, whereas from the women's side, the regional was required just due to the number of teams at a specific level. So that's where a lot of it came down to. It's once again moving Premiership, Championship, so just tiering and breaking it out. On the men's side, it was going 8 and 8, so from the current 16 that exist. We have released the first round of schedules, and it's very much the first draft. It's been reworked now based on some great information and feedback. And then it's trying to figure that pathway. One of the biggest feedbacks I got over the last year was, how do we go from being a branch team to a Premiership team? There was no clear path and understanding on how to do that. So we wanted to make sure that that was incorporated within that, whilst also making sure that there's meaningful competition at each level. So those that are playing in Premiership are getting good games. Will the numbers grow? Can the numbers grow in each of these? Absolutely. Once again, it's a framework in which we can move things and grow things within it, but it's trying to find what's the movement between each of these. What is the kind of that competition level within them? How do we move them from east-west? Whether travel is more of a consideration or competition is more of a consideration. These different aspects are always included, but can be tinkered with, moved, but it's still within a framework. Hopefully that makes sense. On the women's, very much the same idea. As I said, regionally towards the branches is just the number of teams is that determining factor. Making sure there's actual competition. The leagues are still run by the branches, still run at that level. But the idea is, once again, and this is something we're having a look at, is the coaching standards that are then required. So if we look within the men's U18s and a seconds team are required at Prem and Championship, the women's, the numbers aren't there yet. So yes, within Premiership, but within Championship, a seconds team or a U18s is required from 2026, seconds team from 2027. So it's taking that time to grow and work with the clubs to make sure that that's there as each of them come right the way through. What we'll then be looking at is, right, what are the coaching standards required for each of these leagues to make sure that we're increasing that? Based on that, what are the numbers of coaches that need to do a level 2? What are the professional development points required to make that kind of move forward? That'll be one of the new things we discuss in a few minutes. But this is where we're trying to create that meaningful competition while being mindful of travel, but increase the level of our sport. This is where we kind of look at people and say, well, is Marshall high performance? I say no. Is it performance development? Yes. So this is where that terminology and some of that stuff that we have to create a common vernacular is where we're going to have to work on some of this. Okay. So where are we going with all of these things? And some of the new stuff to work that out and to kind of work through is what we call our 4-pronged approach. The development specialists that we've put in place this past year, so within coaching and match officials. So we've got, everybody's here, right? Coaching, we've got Nappy, Gary's left the room, and Sandy. So they'll be working with you in the afternoon. And Karen on the match official side, and everybody knows. So that makes life easier. So what we want to have a look with them is looking at what is the development aspects. I talked earlier about control the controllables. We do not control the educational side, as that is a Rugby Canada thing. What we do control is the development aspects. So putting these places or these personnel in places to help with the quality assurance, to help with some of that standards, to help raise coaching. But also why we try to do it on a regional level is to make sure we understand the needs. What's going to be different in the East, Central, and West is very different. So how do we work with clubs a lot more in order to get what are the needs for your area? So rather than, once again, painting with one brush. The newest one to come in is the RDCs, the Rugby Development Consultants. So that one we're just going through right now. I'm not sure if many have heard of this. But basically, World Rugby provide money to Rugby Canada, who then give us the opportunity to apply for it to create rugby development positions. We have one full-time rugby development officer in Rob, working in the Southwest. But this year, when they offered us money, there was more flexibility. Last year, it was you must do this and it fits into this box and that's that. This year, there's been a change in leadership and it's allowed for the box to be opened and for us to use it in different ways. So we've looked at the opportunity of creating multiple positions across the province. 6, 7 at this point, just trying to finalize that based on clubs. And bring what's needed within club development. We've got the specialists that are working within coach and match official development. How do we work the club development aspect? Is trying to take 6 to 7 resources across the province to work with clubs on a more ground level and try to get through that one. So that's something that's currently under development and hoping we've got sorted in the next month to be able to have them start in February. We're happy to go through more of these things during lunch and stuff if you would like. The technical game leaders, I'm going to go through in more detail in a little bit. And then sessional coaches, a number of clubs would have had these over the last year. Did you want to talk about sessional coaches?
Sure, I can talk briefly. So 2 years ago, it was sort of a pilot program with some Eastern Ontario clubs and then New Brunswick as well. So Rugby Canada tried it out that way. Sessional coaches basically are delivering rugby in the community. So schools like elementary schools and community groups doing rookie rugby programs. And they're looking at the try, play, stay model. So go in, deliver some rugby for like a chunk in a gym class or a community group, right? So they get to try rugby, learn a bit about it, and then play. So looking to organize sort of a festival for a few schools that they were working with or groups that they were working with, or even just a few classes in a school kind of coming together for a bit more of a festival day. And then stay being that they would then be invited to like a try rugby day at a club, introduced to the club, or maybe the club is actually running that festival. So that they stay with the sport, they have an opportunity to continue with the sport outside of those few sessions at their school. So they are like a short-term kind of few months working, a few hours just doing delivery, whereas our RDCs are not sessional coaches. They're not doing the delivery. They're developing the clubs so that the clubs can then do more of that sessional coaching on their own, hopefully.
Excuse me. I know I'm now into the youth and I used to be in the minor, but one really significant challenge was the try rugby, or to allow kids to come and try. I'm thinking in particular of a form that I had to fill out to prove that a kid who had come to one try rugby was not permitted to go to another try rugby. And it seems like Rugby Canada or Rugby Ontario is taking the air out of the.
You were right the first time. It's not us.
Yeah, it's not us.
Okay, so whomever it is, and I appreciate the transparency, that it's really hard to get kids to come out to try rugby when clubs are like I'm gonna say the open secret, clubs are doing it and not reporting it because otherwise kids can't come out. There are so many rules, and I appreciate it. It's a risk. I get it. And there is real liability. I understand that too. But when you're trying to grow clubs and you're trying to get people in, from the club side to you have to thread this needle where the hole is so small. Kids are like, I'm not gonna come back out because it's too hard.
So we have there's a few kind of like workarounds of like, if you know the system, there's a few things that we can do. One of those is the sessional coaches are going into schools. They can do as many as they want in a school where they're learning the game for 6 weeks. And that doesn't count as any, right? Then they can go to one try rugby day with the club. That is a Rugby Canada piece. We don't control that, although we have been advocating for, we need to have a longer try session. We'd also like to have a try contact session because we know in particular for that U12, U14 group, trying non-contact rugby does not tell you that you want to play contact rugby. It's just not an option currently, but it is conversations we're having. Yeah.
Just to give you an image, and I used something similar when I was talking to a hockey group about give it a try sessions. Use the olive narrative when you're talking to Rugby Canada. Theoretically, I'm not a food scientist. If you try olives once, nah. If you eat 9 olives in a row, you will love olives. I have no idea what the science behind it is, but apparently it's a fact. I can't get past the first one.
You need to try 9 olives in a row, apparently, Don.
But apparently that's the piece, so if whatever that works, that's the understanding.
Yeah.
One sample is not enough to
We agree.
allow somebody to make a decision, play for life.
Yeah, we agree. And right now, other than advocating for some change from Rugby Canada, the best workarounds are partnerships with other groups that have their own insurance, right? So run it at a community, run a boys and girls club kind of thing. And Carl Bryan's probably a good person to talk about some of those sort of options. Or use the 12-week insurance. So it's like $25. The problem with that is they still need to sign up. So the other piece that we're advocating for with Rugby Canada is, can we have like a drop-in, right? So that the club could insure a 8-week or 4-session program where you come and try it for a few times, or you show up when you can. Because again, when we talk about sort of like some of our underrepresented groups, that's that much harder. Like there's those extra barriers that if they can just walk into a gym and like they don't know that they're gonna go, but maybe they'll show up and their friend will bring them and they haven't had to sign up, that's gonna get them in. And if it's like, oh, you didn't sign up on Sport Lomo, they're gonna just turn around and go home and lose them.
It's one of those. I did my master's thesis on recruitment and retention. Unfortunately, I didn't know about the olives at the time. But it's exactly that. And in April, I was in Vancouver Island. And what we were told, or started the talk, was a national growth strategy. I'm like, one, I'm delighted you're actually figuring out you need to do something. I've got to be careful, I'm being recorded. But two, we completely agree. We brought the exact same thing up. I'm like, there's no way, like, my daughter is very shy, but she loves going on. She loves doing these things, and she's a social butterfly. So it takes 2 or 3 goes for her to kind of get into it. My son will go out and break your leg if that's what it gets him a ball. Different people, different things. So it needs that. So we've said the same thing. I haven't been invited back since April, but I've actually now been invited to one on Wednesday. So that's one of the big ones for me because it makes no sense.
So I've asked the OHF as well to do something similar. So I think you also need to petition the provincial federal governments, the sport committees, to talk to the insurance industry. 90% of this, if not more,
It is awesome.
driven out of the insurance industry. They have to understand they want to pay less in premiums at 60 and 70. We need children to get active and get off the goddamn computers.
Well, this is where if you look at what Canadian Tire Jumpstart and what they've kind of put forward is that why aren't we taking money from the health and putting it into sport? Like it boggled my mind when I moved here and I found out the budget, the amount of money that goes from government to sports in Canada, it boggles me. It was 200 million from the federal to national sport organizations. Carl, this may be an update that you know about more, but 80 million went towards hosting events. 120 went towards 68 national sport organizations. In Ontario, it's about 16 million, roughly. If that, and a lot of that goes into hosting, which like the revenue generation from hosting is unreal. Like remember the Women's World Cup in 2015? It's like a $380 million economic revenue for which what went back into the sport, nothing. So yeah, it is an insurance thing completely, but it still can't make any sense. There's no rationale.
Trying to approach it from a public health standpoint.
It's one of those I will ask, because when you sit down at your tables, challenges and opportunities is the topic. So go sit at the youth one and put that on there so I can then show it on Wednesday and say, look, here's what the feedback and here's what I'm getting on a regular basis. That'd be great.
If you ever want anybody who has a big mouth, willing to go on.
There's a lot of those in the sport.
If you want to be yeah, big friends. You keep the relationship, I'll go Burger Bridge.
Yeah. Are the sessional coaches, is the idea that those are either, swimming like mushrooms from high schools, or are they designated through clubs, or are they provided by Rugby Ontario?
So we just got the update on Tuesday, that Rugby Canada, because that is funded through the Canadian government. I always get the acronym now, but Community Sport Initiative.
Community Sport for All Initiative.
There we go.
CSAI.
Too many acronyms. But yeah, so that application deadline is around the 20th of December. So Rugby Canada are putting in for sessional coaches, but Government of Canada's new way of doing it, because last year went through us for funding, Next year, anybody that gets in, it's actually directly money going to the club. So the clubs are going to be the ones that have to manage this individual, and so hire this individual. And so our big thing is, well, what does that mean from a payroll perspective? And these kind of aspects that we have questions about. So we're meeting Johnny. I haven't replied to him, did I? Yeah, oops. So we're meeting Johnny from Rugby Canada on Monday or Tuesday, probably Tuesday at this point, and ask those questions, because for me, we don't have enough answers. So we can't go out and say, hey, clubs, this is the new session approach thing, because we don't even know.
I will add that this is started from funding that Rugby Canada has through, I think initially it was World Rugby and the Get Into Rugby program, and now it's through this CSAI. So last year, that was it. We had 4 that we, clubs sort of put their hand up for, right? And we selected 4 that we thought would be best use for them. This year, similar thing, we're waiting to hear how many we'll get from Rugby Canada. So they will allocate them across the country, and then we will allocate them within the province, and the funding will go from Community Sport for All, like from the government, to Rugby Canada, who will send it directly to the clubs instead of going through us this year, which I think hopefully will make everyone's lives a little bit easier. But the other piece to remember is that that sessional coach model, you can duplicate and run. You just need to find the funding somewhere else then. Or you need to run it with, you know, a club volunteer. So Rob is a good one to pick his brain while you're here as well. He's been doing some stuff on kind of like adopt a school program. So trying to train up high school kids to go into their feeder elementary schools. Same thing, right? As they're connected to the club as well. It's the exact same program, but you're not paying a staff member and only having them do it for the time that they're available and paid. You're embedding that into a more sustainable program in the community and creating new leaders.
And sorry, I'm gonna go back to Roland's question about coordinating with the provincial government. Thankfully, there's less of an issue with this in the Kitchener-Waterloo region, but I know working in Toronto, the TDSB like straight armed rugby and said you can't come in, you can't participate. Knowing what I know now, working in an educational institution, there's also a lot of planning all the way through the year. So to show up at, like, you know, whenever this happens in January, to go to a school and say, hey, can we squeeze in? They're gonna say our roster's already full. So what sort of coordination is Rugby Ontario doing, or petitioning, you know, to pick up on what Roland was saying, the provincial government to get some coordination through the different ministries and a little bit of wind behind the back, so to speak.
I spent a good bit of time this past summer in particular. We met because we had a lot of good grace, we'll say, from Blue Card and concussion management. This time last year, the provincial government put out a tender looking for technology modifications and updates and stuff in that way to help with concussion management. Ours was the only one they accepted, despite them having funding to 4. So it's in that way, it was great. Now there's been more taken on, thankfully, but it actually created a fantastic bridge for us to create and say, look, we're doing these good things. How do we work and how do we come better together? So that was a big, big help. So that got me a contact to speak to them. They said I had to speak to OFSA. I blew my head off doing that. Then I went and met a, what do you call it, sport organizing committee. I found the chair of the sport organizing committee for rugby, who happens to be a rugby club member and registrar with one of our clubs. So I had a good chat with him. He said a lot of it would be wasting my time, which I found quite disheartening. But the other good thing, because of what we're trying to do with match officials this past year and finding out who insures them when they're doing games for high schools, because Rugby Canada won't. So we actually got to meet that out of these 72 school boards, 69 have the same insurance company, and 3, Peel Halton, or Peel, Toronto, and Simcoe, have a different insurance company to everybody else. So that kind of, those things over the last little bit has been doing that. What it's led to is, thankfully, with, say, the development, especially with the rugby development consultants list, we're now on a 4-year cycle of funding. So in that way, that's allowed us to go to them and say, look, we can't keep going on a 12-month thing without knowing what's happening, because we can't have sustainability. So now, thankfully, World Rugby funding is on a 4-year. The sessional coach and the community one is actually coming in on a 2-year funding cycle. So it at least gives us momentum going in. For me, it's kind of a waste for 25. But if it's coming in maybe February and then we have to go find people and it starts in March, April, we're way too late. But at least it should hopefully give us that groundwork to get in for 25-26 school year. And to try and move it in that way. And then they're trying to get ahead of themselves. So we'll know before the end of that one, the next 2 years. So it is trying to use those lessons in which to move it to multi-year funding cycles, which is, I'll take it at this point, but the hope is to still keep knocking at the doors. The same situation we're having OUA and OCAA when we're talking to them. I got invited after a lot of badgering to meet with the athletic directors of the OCAA. It was meant to be last week. Yeah, obviously it got cancelled. And it was pushed to May, but trying to get in and talk to these people, been very difficult, but it is something we found is something we have to do. The board at Rugby Ontario decided to create an educational committee in order to find people that are in those areas that will have contacts to be able to go do that for us, that have the right doors to knock on. So Dave Best, who was meant to be here today, unfortunately had a hip surgery, so couldn't make it. He's going to be leading that in order to get into schools at all levels to try and do exactly that, because that's where we have to make inroads.
I will also add, we had a conversation last summer with Ophia, and one of the pieces that came out of that for us, that's kind of led to Rugby Development Consultants, is if she could open that door to connect us in a really big, meaningful way to elementary schools, are we ready for the demand that's going to come? And we said, well, we have one RDO. He can't even meet the demand in his, 4 or 5 club region, right? So what we're trying to do, come on, Rob. What we're trying to do with the RDCs is really develop the capacity and the infrastructure in the club so that A, we know we have really quality programming that kids are coming into, and B, that clubs can actually go out and do more sustainable outreach on their own. So that when we have these connections, when we can make better inroads with government and the school boards and all that, our clubs are at a place to not drop the ball kind of thing, right? Like if we go in and then we mess that up, getting back in might be a lot harder. So we want to make sure that we have everything really ready. We know it's going to take time to get into schools, but we want to make sure that when that can happen, we're hitting the ground running. Yeah.
At the junior level, it seems bonkers to me that schools and clubs don't both play games at the same time.
I hear you.
It drives me nuts. Kids should play more rugby at that age, and the school system is very short. Some schools might play 3 games and they're done. So those kids there, they don't get to play in a club until the whole of the off-season is finished. That's nuts.
And I find it because I worked within Sport England, in which when I was at the FA, my job was schools, football, soccer, and then actually having that partnership and that alignment between the two of them and working the schedules out. When kind of seeing this, I completely agree, because a big part of our registration conversation is like, well, we won't know our registrations till office is over. Like, what the hell? So it makes no sense, but it's also, do we need to build a stronger structure to make sure that people are choosing rugby and are ready for rugby, like registration and things open in January. So in that way, why aren't we being ready? Is that we as in clubs, Rugby Ontario, everything else isn't strong enough to be beckoning them in? Or what is that problem, or where is that gap? Isn't that something I'm getting into now because we've got enough? It is, exactly, that's what I'm like, I'm not getting in there, I'm not going, but it is a conversation we need to have pretty soon.
Registration is late in September for the next year.
Oh, I agree, but and this is where we're getting the issue, we get pushed off to January and then clubs actually don't open up their things till April, and I'm like, what the are you doing? So is it something that we now need to step back and have it ready for November? Then that's what we can do, because we're now getting the systems in place to do that.
As an outsider, that's the biggest barrier that I can see to kids playing, is the fact that it's just not aligned and it doesn't go all year round.
Yeah.
When it can.
So this is where I'll get, because we really want to try to get a few more of these.
Be mindful of burnout and cross sports.
But periodization can work.
You shouldn't just be playing one sport
God, no, but we can work through this. Right, I'm gonna get us back here, but sorry. Put those in at the table. This is where challenges and opportunities, that's the exact things we need to have, and this is where we need to get to having these conversations. Right, get through the game leader one. The big one on why we went this route. A lot of places, have done rugby, which is lovely for 4 hours, but is it enough? The big one for me was looking at the number of teams versus the number of registered coaches versus the number of kids. So what we wanted to do is have a look and say, right, at that U4, 6, right, even into U12, it's the coaches that are also ref. How many of those are actually younger people that can come back that are 16, 17, even 15, that can we use them to kind of come back in and train them? We look at the numbers that are going into the level 1 courses at the age of 14, 15, they're not ready for that. Trying to get them onto a field at U16s, even to AOR, it's too much. So how do we put them back in at U10, 12, 14 to even create that pathway for younger refs, even smaller refs, in order to get that? But I know a lot of it is just people not registered. I know that. My concern is not the registration. On the finance side, we probably won't like to hear that. But that's not the concern. It's more, as a dad, my concern is who's on the field with my kid. Do they have education? Are they actually able to help my kid get better and enjoy rugby and keep them in rugby? So the hope is that with the game leader, keep going. You have all these things, so just pop all the way through. But with the game leader one, it's more right. How do we provide the clubs with a technical resource in which to do this internally? So what we want to do is just educate technical game leaders. So you're going to tell me leaders, we've already sent it out. I haven't got many of them, so please do send it. We'll send a reminder. We want to train you. So you're going to find a leader within your club that's able to train the people in your club. I don't need them to come and register on a course. I don't want to get, they hopefully will start to go through the level 1 and level 2s and stuff like that. But just to start, to get a foundation of education or development is build the resources in clubs or in areas. So we will train you. We'll put you on the NCCP course. Beth Bartz, who's one of ours, will be doing that side of it. Then we've got our development specialists that will work with quality assurance. We'll teach them the rugby coaching side of it and then add in a match official component, just the basics. There's like a 3-hour practical session. There'll be 2 hours probably online, so as to make it nice and easy. But the idea is to make sure that at a local level, the resource is there to educate and develop people. Making sure we then have the resource behind that to provide quality assurance and annual training. It's one of the people keep saying, it's like, well, courses cost too much. Like, we already make a loss. I wish we could make it less money. But the biggest area is like people going on and doing level 1s may not need to do a level 1. Maybe they just need to be a game leader if they're only working up to U12. And this way, this is free. If clubs want to charge whatever you're going to do, that's fine. We have it in our budget. We are going to educate, train, whatever the word is, of 30 people, 20 people, whatever we can find of good technical leaders at a local level that we can do on an annual basis. It's a nice, easy way to go. And then we've got 3 development specialists across the province that are going to be able to work with them and make sure that quality assurance is there. So it's to try to take away. People shouldn't be doing a level 1 if they're only working with smaller kids. The waste.
Or non-contact programs. Right? If it's an adult rec league, we want someone leading that, someone who can do some coaching and run the little games, but they don't need to be a level 1 match official to run that game.
No. So this is where we're trying to reduce the cost of putting the people on a course that don't need to be on a course. People that are on courses should be aiming at that 14, 16, 17 seniors. They're the ones that should be on that. Game leaders, so the old rookie way of doing it, is where we want them, those younger people doing it, as anything, or younger kids. So,
Kind of build on this, I think it would be also interesting if we started to actually use ARs at the junior level. And you know, in hockey, I don't hire referees out of the gate, I hire linespeople. And they spend time learning and growing in less critical roles.
exactly.
And then they get confidence to up goes the flag.
Yeah.
I know the cost is a little bit more, I personally feel it'll be well worth it. And the officials you have now, when you're hiring them, you can give them a significant number of games, so it's a good part-time job for them. Instead of the 2 or 3 where they go, maybe, whatever.
And this is where Jeff and I actually had this conversation about acting. We're talking about creating a junior academy. So it's in that way, giving them a business plan. Here's how much you can make over the summer by doing these sessions. When we came to lead budgeting for this year, we added in a substantial amount for AORs. This year, and I think of the number, we at least tripled, if not quadrupled, the number of AORs used this year compared to last year for exactly that reason. What we want to do is have them try out U12, U14 to AOR at 16s, 18s, and to then have like a Rebecca on the middle. And this is where we're going to be getting at clubs. Is like, can you please get mics? So in that way, the communication can happen and the education and development can happen. And this is where we're going to be pressing to say, look, the person in the middle is not just officiating, they're also educating the people on the sidelines. And so we need to be able to have that system, to have mics in place to do that. It's like, how many games can we video? Can we get a resource back in there to help with video analysis so as these younger people can do that? But this is where it was one of those that was so much on my list last year, I didn't get to put it in place for this year. But it's still very much on the mind of having that ref academy, I think we're going to call it, to give them, here, make a summer job, do a 7s for a day and you make freaking a good bit of money.
Let's chat more about the video.
Yeah.
I see it as a great program. But
yeah, perfect. But yeah, so this is where we're trying to get to, because I completely agree. It's like younger people need to have the opportunities, but they also need to know they are financially, it's a good opportunity for them. And they're not going to be abused, because coaches and match officials are now one game management unit that will work well together.
We're all on the same team here.
All right. Yeah, we have to probably skip. You get all of these. But yeah, we've spoken about standards and that requirement for U18. We're going to be working more with Sport Lomo on team sheets, so as people actually have to, 1, fill them in. But 2, have the proper people on the sidelines, so you have the coaching qualification to match it. So we will be getting an alert from now on if the correct coach doesn't have the required qualification to be on there. There is a Rugby Canada standards one that the coaching crew are going through this afternoon. They'll be starting you on that one. And then this year, part of the club renewal is that there is MO liaisons for competitions. So in that way, when referees show up, that they're going to be treated well, and they're going to be met and shown around and being helped on the day. VO is something that we have partnered with. So this was sent out a year ago at this point, but what we want to try to create is a video library. So to make sure that whatever way you are videoing games, we want to make sure that we have that and can use that for development opportunities. It's particularly important on referee side, but also for coaching. Because in that way we can see how the games actually run, and do game-based learning is going to be vital for any of those. So we really got to expand our video side of things, so we'll talk about. Team Snap, does anybody use Team Snap? Yeah, quite a few do. I did when I was in soccer. So what we've done is we've just signed a renewal with them. So if you are using Team Snap, you can get a 20% discount on any of your upcoming renewals. If you're not getting it, come talk to me. I would go straight to the business manager that we have the contract with. It's also something that when we're doing out, let's say, festivals and stuff like that, if you are using it, we can give you the template, the Excel in which you can put it in directly so as to create your schedules and stuff in there to allow for that.
How long is your partnership for?
We got 1 more year.
Sports X is way better.
It was one of those that so many clubs are using this that this isn't benefiting me whatsoever. It's just if clubs are using
talks to each other, so at the time the game of Fergus changes,
yeah,
it'll change on my website.
Well, the hope is that Sport Lomo were meant to have one, and so then it really automates it, and that didn't happen. So that's just quite a different way. That's why I don't talk about it. That would be a lovely one integrated system, is where the hope is that we can get to, and that I would love to have. LMS, so the new learning management system that Rugby Canada have released. We got the info on Monday, or we got the release on Monday. So this is what's going to be supposedly in place for 2025. how do I put it nicely? I can't, so I won't talk about it. But the theory that you do in a level 1 will move online, so as to make the days nearly complete practical. Is the first step towards that. What we can do is create more of a online for theory side of things, and so allow for that side of it. All the courses will start to appear on our homepage versus going into that T&E site that nobody can find and use. So as to make that easier of finding courses. And then your new cert. So whenever you complete a course, it will be automated into your sport normal profile, which then has that standards and back to team sheets that will have an impact from there. So connecting in for competitions and working through. There's still some questions about that system that we're trying to figure out. So we may be using the old one for now and try to tailor a little bit of both because we want to release a calendar for 2025 soon. Echo's nearly finished it. So in that way that's being done, and we may not be able to wait for Rugby Canada to sort this out. So we may have to start with the old one and then integrate this as we're going along. The final two pieces. Coaching committee. So I've been lucky to have a great group of people working with me on match officials for the last while. So now what I want to do is start a coaching committee. So starting in January, the new chair, I found out an hour ago. I've been trying to track him down for a while. We're going to start working on terms of reference, start working on kind of putting a group together. But what we'll be looking at is finding people from across the province. Finding people that work with different age groups, so as to work with us on building out coaching. So whether it's the coaching standards, whether it's development needs, opportunities, what do we need from a coaching to raise the standard of coaching within our province? So our 3 development specialists will sit on that as well, and they're also educators. So that makes an easy connection within that too. Okay, so that's one that's going to be starting. I guess we're starting work next week, but they're kind of more public in January. The last one within this is the development matrix. So it's kind of back to what Barb was talking about earlier on. So this is something that we worked with, that I had within soccer, and so wanted to try bring it within rugby. So it's looking at some of that, what Barb was saying. If you're doing at these age groups and these criteria, what is the different criteria work their way across? So this is a current working on developing opportunities. So it's trying to break down every part of the game and then finding at different age groups, what is that meant and where do we mean from that? Anyone else?
No, we won't get into this too much because we're over time, but there's a minor side for this as well. And yeah, the idea is just to put, again, like all of these pieces together, still a bit of a work in progress, and with help from coaching committee and our development specialists in that. This will all kind of connect in together would be the idea.
It's kind of meant to be a bit of a help towards clubs that are trying to figure out, well, what space do I need? What are we trying to do? Where do we go? Introducing the sport to new people. How do we do that? How do we tell coaches on what's required and what's the different criteria within their thing? We're then looking at seasons, different. Don't take this as gospel and Bible. We said this is very much a work in progress. So we haven't gone out to public and gone out to get input yet on it. But it's trying to look at a bit more of a structure to guide people versus being the rule of the land. So on how we try to get across, it's kind of what Barb was saying on, well, if we show up with 10, what does game on mean? How do we set criteria? How do we set structures and things that way? More of a guide for clubs to be able to get help and understand.
Just a suggestion, can we, for the practice to match ratio, use minutes rather than numbers? If I practice once for 3 hours, am I better than the club that practices twice for 45 minutes?
My legs would say you're an ass. But yes, no, that's for sure. And this is where we haven't sent this out for input.
And with the festivals, the games are so short. You're really getting a game's worth of games in your day, but the number would seem extreme.
Absolutely. And this is why, as I said, this hasn't gone out yet for feedback. We definitely will be sending it out to people looking for input. But it is something we thought might be useful as a guide when we're looking at practices and various things in that way. All right. Yeah, we can get through. So right now we want to use a lot of what we've been talking about, take what we've been hearing, use the tables. So you'll have to bring a chair with you. But I've broken it out into 4 groups because I want smaller groups, like 4 people if possible. So we've got minor, youth, junior, senior, and there's 2 sets of each tables right the way around the room. If you can please find yourself a table. Match officials that are here, not many of you, but you can just be at different tables as well to kind of get some input, and please not have 2 people from the same organization at a table. We'll be wandering around, the development specialists will split themselves up, and the staff will split themselves up at different tables as well. And then at the end of this, we'll call back and have a quick debrief at the end to see what we've come out of. Okay, so we are way behind. I'm gonna blame you for that one. So we're only gonna have about 15 minutes for this at this point. So if we can use that, and we're gonna get into lunch then. So